Alright, so this time around I'm going to show you how to change clutch plates and a clutch basket on a YZ250. This goes with any other dirt bike out there, it's essentially the same thing. But first step, before you even touch the motorcycle, is get your new fiber plates or friction plates. And you want to get them soaking in your favorite oil. Use whatever oil you use in the bottom end of your bike. I happen to use Rotella 1540. I put them in Ziploc bags and dump enough oil in there to get the plates nice and saturated, and you want to make sure all of them get soaked at least for a few hours before you install them, because if you don't, your clutch will be grabby when you go to install it. It's happened to me before, so just be patient with it and let them sit for a minimum of a few hours. Next, go over to the bike, drain the oil. You can do this actually without draining oil if you just tip the bike over on its left side all the way over, and most of the oil will stay in there, but I had to change my oil anyway, so it's easier just to drain it. Then pull off the little safety pin holding the rear brake pivot bolt in, and take off the rear brake lever. Make sure you don't lose that spring. Then go ahead and start popping off those 8mm clutch cover bolts. Then carefully remove the cover. Just give it a light bump to break the seal, and it'll just pop right off there. I have a little drip pan to catch any oil that may be left in there. Next, start removing the 6 spring-loaded bolts. They're 10mm head on them. Just I'm hitting the ratchet there just to get them started, so the inner hub actually doesn't spin. They're not in there very tight, so just give them a quick bump to break the torque and wind them all out, and put the springs and bolts and washers all off to the side. Next, pull off the pressure plate. Just slides right off there. And there's a little plunger on the other side that should stay with it, but just leave it on there. Then start removing the individual plates. As you'll notice, the first one is a friction plate, and at the very back, the very last one is going to be also a friction plate. So you remove all your old plates and set the whole pack off to the side. Now the clutch kit that I bought only came with friction plates. I did that on purpose because I wanted to reuse these steelies, as they look fine. None of them are burnt or warped or anything, so I'm going to reuse them one more time. It's just the frictions that are worn out on me. Now these next steps are only if you're changing your basket, or if you need to change your basket, but first you got to get yourself a clutch holding tool. It's essentially a giant vice grip, and you clamp the inner hub, and inside there is a giant nut and a lock washer that has these little tabs that bend down over the nut. So you need to hammer the one out of the way that's actually locking the nut. Tap it up out of the way enough so that the nut could freely turn. And I believe it's a 29mm socket, but this one I'm using here is actually 1 1/8 inches, and it works fine. And go ahead and pop the nut off. It's pretty tight, so watch you don't smash your knuckles on anything when it releases. Wind the nut off. Take the lock washer off. Then you can go ahead and pull the inner hub right off. Next, there's a little spacer washer in between the inner hub and outer basket. Then the outer basket will just slide right off too. And be careful not to lose, there's a roller bearing and a bushing on the shaft underneath this thing, so make sure they stay on the shaft. You can inspect the basket. I'm reusing this. I just pulled it off for purposes of the video. Inspect the the tangs for grooves. If your clutch is grabbing big time, it's because your basket is likely grooved. This one looked fine, so I'm going to reuse it. It's mostly just wear marks on it. They're not physically, the tangs aren't physically grooved. And just slide it back on, put that spacer back in, followed by the inner hub. And the inner hub is on that spline shaft that's physically connected to the transmission. So you just have to line the splines up, push it on. It should spin freely and independently of the outer basket. Next, I'm breaking off the one tab of the lock washer that was previously used because I don't want it to fall off in the clutch there when I'm riding because it's weak. And start the nut again. Put the clutch holding tool back on. And the torque for that giant nut is 75 Newton meters or 54 foot-pounds, so it's pretty tight. So get your torque wrench and give it a haul. Do a couple clicks and it's secured. Then you can remove the clutch holding tool, we don't need it anymore. And then use that other tab that's left over on the lock washer and bend it over the nut so the nut can't turn. You only get 2 available locks out of each washer and then you have to go buy another one. Then start restacking your new friction plates. Again, start with a friction plate, then a steely, then a friction plate, then a steely, and just keep alternating back and forth. And at the end you should be left with one more friction plate, just like that. And then you can put on the pressure plate. And then you can go ahead and shove the springs back on along with their associated bolts. And the torque for these, it's really light, 10 Newton meters is all it is. So just wind them in offset until they bottom with your regular ratchet, and then torque them up in an opposite pattern. Next, I like to give the clutch an actual try. So adjust it up top, give it a few pulls, make sure the pressure plate moves in and out nicely and it feels good on the handle. Then clean the sealing surfaces of the cover. Go ahead and reinstall that cover. Tighten it up. It's a good idea to clean and re-grease that rear brake hinge bolt there. And just tighten it back up, and that's it, guys. The very last step is just to fill the bike with oil, and that's it. It's really an easy job. Just to change the plates, it only really takes about half an hour. So anyway, I hope this helped, and if so, give me a like, and I'll talk to you guys later.